All right, well, looks like we're live now, guys. Welcome to the very first episode of the War Week Chat Room. We're using a different format, so hopefully you guys will enjoy this a little bit more. In the future, we're going to bring up guests like trainers, fighters, as well as our good friend, the editor-in-chief of FightSaga.com, Mr. Lee Cleveland. But right now, we're being joined by Mr. IOTBA. Happy birthday, Mr. Karray Bradshaw. He's a newest colleague and contributing writer to FightSaga.com. How are you, Karray?
Man, shout out to everybody out here, man, from that 214 to across the pond. Shout out to Fight Saga, shout out to Lee, shout out to Joseph. Shout out to everybody who are part of the movement. Y'all know how I'm coming. Y'all know how I've been coming. Y'all know how I'm going to continue to come. I'm ready to cook, Mr. Herron.
Very good, brother. Happy birthday, man. Hope you have a good one, brother.
Thanks, big dog.
Many pleasant returns too, brother, because coming from an old codger, dude, I would give away my house to be your age again, man. Chinga. But I tell you what, the first item on the syllabus is going to be, and if you guys are looking at the ticker, it's called "Why All the Mass Hatred for the Current WBO Welterweight Champion, Mr. Terence "Bud" Crawford." This is something that you've been scratching your head about for quite a while, haven't you, Karray?
Yeah, man, it's just real upsetting. Like the respect that this guy Terence Crawford don't get. This shocks me, and I'm just glad we're gonna be able to just really go in real tough on this today.
Okay, well, to understand Terence "Bud" Crawford, right, and this is a guy who's been fighting for respect since he was in the amateurs, right? This is a guy who, because he campaigns and came up in the Midwest, right, in Omaha, Nebraska, he didn't get a lot of respect because there's been a huge stigma among amateur and professional fighters that if you're from the Midwest, well, a very good chance you can't fight, at least not at the world-class level. But Terence Crawford is the exception to the rule. And even in the amateurs, no major platform or promoter wanted to sign him. The only reason why he was signed by Top Rank is because of the high praise and recommendation from one Timothy Bradley. Timothy Bradley sparred him several times in the amateurs and on his way up. And Tim was like, you know what? Cameron Duncan, his manager, said, you know what? You need to sign this guy. This guy is too good to be sitting on the shelf without a major management deal or a major promotional deal. And at the time, Cameron Duncan was working side by side with Top Rank, consistently feeding them talent, right? So they took a chance and signed Terence Crawford. And Terence got his big break, right? And this says a lot about the character of Terence Crawford. You've got to go all the way back to 2013, right? He was just an undercard fighter, right? On the Brandon Rios, Mike Alvarado fight card. That was going to be on HBO. It was at the Mandalay Bay on Saturday, March 30th, 2013, right? You got to go all the way back there. And the reason why this was his coming out party is Braydis Prescott was scheduled to fight an Eastern European fighter that now eludes me, and it's of no consequence. And so Braydis Prescott, scheduled to be in the co-main event of the evening, was without a dance partner 2 weeks before the event, right? So, and Braydis Prescott was considered one of the more avoided fighters at 140 pounds at the time, because if you're familiar with this guy, he had just knocked out Amir Khan in the first round, right? So no one wanted to fight this guy. They considered him to be too much risk for the reward. So Top Rank, Bob Arum, Brad Goodman, Bruce Trampler, the brass at the mines at the Hall of Fame badasses at Top Rank, right? They're like, well, hey, we've got this guy, Bud Crawford, at 35, and he's a big 35-pounder, so let's ask Cameron Duncan if this guy will take it. And Cameron Duncan didn't want any part of it, said, you know what? You're jumping from the wading pool into the ocean. This is a huge assignment, but as your manager, I've got to offer this to you anyway. It's only 2 weeks to prepare for arguably the hardest puncher and the most avoided guy in the division. And what did Terence Crawford say? Hey, man, it's my opportunity to be on HBO. Bring it. Let's do it. And so the rest is history. What happened? He took Braydis Prescott to school, outboxed him, winning a unanimous decision, right? That put Terence Crawford on the map. So anyone who thinks that Terence Crawford turns down opportunities hasn't really been following his career. And just look up and down. Like, this is a guy who won his first major world title. The following year, March 1st of 2014, he went to Glasgow, Scotland to challenge, at the time, the WBO champ, Ricky Burns. Ricky Burns at the time, right? He was the champ. It was unheard of to go to Scotland and lift the title from a European fighter. But they gave Terence Crawford that opportunity, and what did he say? Let's do it. Without hesitation, he goes, let's do it. So he goes and beats the pants off of Ricky Burns, getting a unanimous decision in Scotland. Now, you've got to put forth a serious presentation and performance to lift the title off the home fighter in Scotland. That never happens, right?
Yep.
So once again, this is a guy who doesn't turn down any opportunities. So, and so 3 months later, right? Okay, so at this same time, while he's doing this, at that time, Top Rank was currently negotiating a fight with 50 Cent and HBO. They wanted Yuriorkis Gamboa versus Mikey Garcia, right?
Yep.
Two guys who have been on HBO for a while, and HBO loved this fight. Mark Hirschman loved this fight. And unfortunately, because they love Yuriorkis Gamboa, thought he was one of the most exciting fighters in boxing, they were offering Yuriorkis Gamboa more money than Mikey Garcia, even though Mikey Garcia had the title, right? Mm-hmm. So Mikey basically said, "Okay, well, I'm not gonna fight Yuriorkis Gamboa unless I make more money than him, because I'm the champ." And Top Rank said, you know what? You're going to make us look bad if you don't take this fight, because HBO loves this matchup. But they think and they know Yuriorkis Gamboa is the bigger draw. Numbers don't lie. He gets bigger ratings. So you take what they're willing to give you, and this is your opportunity to become a star. Mikey and Robert Garcia said, no dice. We're going to sit out. And Top Rank said, if you don't take this, this is really going to make us look bad. They didn't care. They backed out. And so HBO was like, okay, well, Bob, what are we going to do? Because we really love that fight. And he goes, well, I tell you what, we just got this title holder that put an exhibition the last year ago when he was on HBO. Terence Crawford just won the WBO lightweight title. How about we put together Terence Crawford versus Yuriorkis Gamboa? Mark Hirschman said, it's not Mikey Garcia, but we'll take it. Mm-hmm. So Terence Crawford took less money, and he said, well, if I'm taking less money, how about we have the fight in front of my hometown fans in Omaha, Nebraska? HBO loved the idea. So they put it at the CenturyLink Center in Omaha, Nebraska. So Terence Crawford took this fight immediately with only 2 months to prepare. And the rest is history. He beat the brakes off of Yuriorkis Gamboa, being the first fighter to not only beat him, but to stop him within the distance, handing the former Olympian his first loss. And the rest is history. It made Terence Crawford one of the biggest young stars in boxing. Now, keep in mind, this is a fighter that does not avoid anybody and does not turn down opportunities. He went on to face and defeat Raimundo Beltran, Tomas Delorme, Jerry Jean of Canada, Hank Lundy, an undefeated Victor Postal in a unification match at 140 pounds. John Molina Jr., former Olympic gold medalist Felix Diaz, former undefeated world champion Julius Sindongo, formerly undefeated welterweight champion who is just coming off of a big win against Manny Pacquiao, Jeff Horn, former undefeated light welterweight titleist Jose Benavidez Jr., former two-division world champion Amir Khan, formerly undefeated former Olympian Igas Kovalevskis, and former IBF welterweight champion Kell Brook. So once again, if you look at his resume, look how many guys he's defeated that were formerly undefeated or former world champions or current world champions. How can anyone hate on this guy? Why? Because he's not fighting one of the old welterweight names on PBC's roster? And once again, Karray, how is that his fault? How is that his fault? Okay, it looks like we lost Karray. So, looks like we're going to hopefully try to get him back. Let's see if we can try to get Karray back, right? Okay, there he is. There he is. Let's bring him back. Karray, we lost you for a second, brother. What happened?
I apologize. I don't know what happened, man. It just seemed like it started getting staticky.
That's all right, man. But you know what? What is your theory? It happens, brother.
The thing is, everything you spoke on was just so much fact. And what you spoke on was the reason why I look at Terence Crawford, and all young fighters should look at Terence Crawford as the epitome of boxing. And when opportunity is brought your way, you should take it and run. You shouldn't run from it. You should run to it. You made some excellent points with the Bradis Prescott. 2 weeks. Took that.
Well, here, Karray. This is the biggest point I brought. And this is why I brought up his history, right? Mm-hmm. So the reason why I gave you a recap of his history. Why on earth, seeing that this guy doesn't turn down opportunities, he never has. He's never shown a history of doing it. So why does he get blamed, right? Why does he get blamed for not fighting the PBC roster of welterweights? Because for some strange reason, fans seem to think that it's his fault. Why do you think that is?
I have the slightest idea. Because at the end of the day, Terence Crawford been in the welterweight division since June 2018 when he dethroned Jeff Horn, winning that W.A.W 147-pound title. He's been there almost 3 years. He told everybody when he was undisputed at 140, he was coming up to 147, he was coming here to dominate. When he came up here, when they asked Keith Thurman about him, Keith Thurman say, "Oh, I ain't thinking about Terence Crawford. He not on my radar." Errol Spence told him, "Well, before he came here, you go get a belt." He went and got that belt. Then what Errol Spence tell him? "Oh, why would I fight you when I could take the easy route?" And Sean Porter, don't talk to me about Sean Porter. This was the same guy when it came to him, Terence Crawford, and Kenny Porter. We're brothers. We're happy and we're singing and we're colors. But look, though, this what happened right here with Sean Porter, Joseph. Sean Porter had choice in life. We got choices that we got to make. And he had the choice whether he wanted to fight Errol Spence and unify with him or he fought Terence Crawford. He chose to fight Errol Spence. And when he lost that fight in a close, competitive fight. I thought Errol Spence edged that fight because of the knockdown. Other than that, I would have had no problem if they would have gave Sean Porter that fight. But he lost that fight in a close competitive fight. And now, since he don't have no belt now he want to fight Terence Crawford.
Well,
it's like, okay.
Well, here's this should be greater evidence, right? That Top Rank and Terence Crawford, they're not to blame for these matchups not happening. When it came time for a contract extension and to re-sign Terence Crawford, one of the stipulations was, well, Terence Crawford wanted and deserved a raise. So Bob Arum and Top Rank, they gave Terence Crawford a guaranteed $4 million per fight. And they were saying, well, this is, more than likely we'll be able to make over the next couple years several big fights with several of the other big name fighters at 147. So the investment will be well worth it. They basically gave him the same deal that they gave Tim Bradley. But in the case of Tim Bradley, they had Manny Pacquiao, JMM, Ruslan Provodnikov, all under the same promotional banner, Brandon Rios. So it was well worth it. They could stick him in those big fights, and it would be worth it. Even though Tim Bradley was never a big marquee draw, he was never a strong A-side, but giving him that big $4 million guarantee, they knew he was good enough to pair him up against Manny, pair him up against JMM, pair him up against Ruslan Provodnikov, pair him up against Brandon Rios, and they would be great competitive fights. So with that same strategy in mind, they gave him a big fight extension and guarantee of $4 million per fight. Mm-hmm. So they've been trying to get him these big fights to make their investment pay off for him. So a lot of people bring up the fact, well, Bob Arum admitted that he's losing money. Well, that's not their fault. They've been trying to get the big fights. They've been complaining about this for the past 2 years, saying that, we can't get any fights across the street. We've been trying, we've been calling them out for the past 2-3 years, and they don't want any part of Bud Crawford, even though he has a major world title. Because he's not the biggest marquee draw in boxing, he's only a red-hot commodity in his home area of Omaha, Nebraska. But because he's not a huge draw anywhere else, he's considered more risk than reward by everyone, right? So this is a real problem. But what I want to know is, why place all the blame for the big matchups not happening on the guy who has a history of not turning down opportunities?
You know what it is? Because in this business, if you know boxing, none of these fighters fear each other. So I would never say, oh, Errol Spence fear Terence Crawford, or Sean Porter fear him, or Keith Thurman fear him. That's not the problem. But the thing about it is, game recognizes game. So just because you may not fear a man, you understand who you are dealing with. And when you look at Terence Bud Crawford, ever since he came onto the scene, he's been a killer. He's been one of them guys, just like you said, a high risk, low reward. Even though he doesn't have that huge following, when it came to the big moments, not only did he show up, he showed out. But it's not his fault that these guys, Errol Spence done gave him 1,000,001 things to do. He first told him, get a belt. Then why would I fight you not take the easy route? Then I get 80-20, 70-30, 60-40. He said that.
Oh, that's garbage. Yeah. That's just garbage. Look, Sean Porter is fearless. And all of these guys would step in the ring with Godzilla if it meant a career high payday. Like all of these guys, they're in boxing because they're tough, they're durable, and they fear no man in the ring. Let's just get that out of the way. And you already stated that. In my opinion, it just goes against the roadmap that advisor Al Heyman has planned out for all of his fighters. And if you notice, this ruined everything for any kind of interpromotional effort for PBC. Keep in mind, when Bob Arum and Al Heyman were negotiating Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder 2 and 3, they were also talking about potentially putting together a similar deal between Spence and Crawford. And Al Heyman was all for it. They said, well, let's just get by this. We'll see how it goes. Well, obviously, we've seen what happened, right? Now, Al Heyman lost one of his biggest earners, arguably his top earner, in Deontay Wilder. He lost everything. Deontay Wilder, since getting beaten up and knocked out February 24th, 2020, hasn't entered the ring, hasn't fought since. Okay, well, Al Heyman, after that happened, did not enter any kind of negotiation with Bob Arum on behalf of Errol Spence for a Terence Crawford fight because he does not want to risk that same thing happening to Errol Spence Jr. That's his biggest draw right now for PBC. Okay? And if he loses...
So basically what you're saying...
Similar, yep, it's Al Heyman. Al Heyman says, you know what? We don't need that right now. So
basically what you're saying, Joseph, is he's not taking no more risks because he's seen what happened to Deontay Wilder.
Yep,
at the same
that's exactly right. It's no coincidence. That's right. It's no coincidence. And the only people who are completely oblivious to the facts of this are Spence and his nut-riding fans. That's it. And I question whether or not they're actually real fans of boxing. Because real fans of the sport want to see the best fighters compete against the best. Who cares about the outcome? We just want to see it. But these fanboys, they're not real fans of boxing. All they do is support a specific platform of fighters and a specific network. That's it. Real fans want to see the best fight the best. Damn the outcome. We don't care. So these guys who are trying to rationalize and justify why Spence versus Crawford hasn't happened, you have to question whether or not they're real fans of boxing. And that's it. So your final thoughts on what's next for Terence Crawford, brother?
It's up in the air what's next. Nobody knows what's next. We all think, we have our assessments of what we think is going to happen next. And one thing I want to speak on too, Joseph, a lot of people making jokes about Terence Crawford sparring with Shakur Stevenson. They never came up with the thought that Shakur Stevenson is a southpaw. Terence Crawford working with a southpaw. Who is the southpaw that everybody's mentioning that Terence Crawford is supposedly fighting next? Manny Pacquiao. So I think that's great that a talent of Shakur Stevenson is down there actually working with Terence Crawford. I think that's great on both ends. What's your thoughts about that?
You know what? I think that, it's just a formality. I think you're going to hear this announced over the next month or so. I think you're going to hear Terence Crawford versus Manny Pacquiao announced for the Middle East, somewhere in Dubai, because that's the only benefactor. A lot like Joshua versus Fury. It's the only benefactor that is willing to put up the kind of site fee that they're looking for. Manny Pacquiao doesn't care about titles at this stage of his career. He's the sport's only 8-division world titleist. He couldn't care less at this stage of his career. At his age, at 42, he doesn't give a shit about any world title any longer, right? He wants the money. He's getting ready to run for president of the Philippines next year. This is it. For all intents and purposes, this is going to be his last fight. He wants, regardless of opposition, $40 million. And here's why he's going to choose Top Rank and Terence Crawford. It has absolutely nothing to do with Terence Crawford. And it has absolutely nothing to do with his WBO title. What it has everything to do with is Top Rank's infrastructure and ability to broker a deal that's going to garner him $40 million in just for showing up, and is going to have the infrastructure and TV dates in place to promote the event on ESPN, as well as distribute the pay-per-view worldwide. Because although Manny Pacquiao has his own promotional outfit, Manny Pacquiao Promotions, he doesn't have the relationships or the infrastructure set in place to organize an event of this caliber, as well as distribute the pay-per-view worldwide. That's the reason why he's going to choose Terence Crawford. It's because of his affiliation with Top Rank and their relationship with ESPN. That's it.
And another thing I think also too is when Manny Pacquiao with the PBC, he was under the understanding that he was gonna get a Floyd Mayweather rematch. He never got that.
Hey man, shout out to our brother Hector Rivas, man. How are you doing, brother?
What's up, Hector?
Thank you for joining us today, my friend. Huh? I'm sorry. Go ahead. What was that again?
What's your thoughts about that? Like, also, I think another factor in it too is when he went and signed over the PBC, he was under the understanding that he was going to get a rematch with Floyd Mayweather. It never happened.
Oh yeah, of course. Look, this is what Al Heyman does, right? And this was told to me by several fighters who used to work and fight under the PBC banner. What Al Heyman will do is say, look, I can't guarantee you a fight with this guy, but I can guarantee that you will never get a fight with this guy unless you sign an advisory deal with PBC. And so that's the way it works with Al Heyman. So once again, all of the people who are saying, well, Terence Crawford needs to go across the street, that's still no guarantee that he'll get the fight with Errol Spence Jr. Because right now, Errol Spence Jr., and his fans are right in this sense, he is the A-side. He is the bigger breadwinner, right? He is the more mainstream viable commodity and the bigger ticket selling attraction. He is. So do you really think Al Heyman is going to roll the dice? What if Terence Crawford beats him? And he is fighting under the PBC banner. Is he going to replace that kind of money that Errol Spence is currently making? It's no guarantee that Terence Crawford is going to get that fight. Just like you pointed out with the Manny Pacquiao situation, it's no guarantee he's going to get that fight anyway. It's not a solution for everything. And people need to realize that. Okay, Heyman has his own agenda and his own plan for every single one of his fighters. Look at Gervonta Davis. He's fighting Mario Barrios. Who the hell asked for that fight? Is it the biggest money fight that he could be making? No, but it doesn't matter. It's an intriguing fight, and it's not the safest fight he could have made, but it's one that barely moves the needle. And when you look at how much trouble Mario Barrios had against a southpaw, the last southpaw he faced, Akhmedov, he was lucky to win that fight, and he had a lot of trouble, and he ate plenty of right hooks, straight left hands. Okay, they're putting Gervonta Davis in the best possible option at this time, and they're trying to get him to be a simultaneous 3-division world champion, even though anyone who knows anything about the sport understands that Mario Barrios isn't a legitimate world champion. He's currently holding the WBA regular title in that division, whatever that means. Okay, Gervonta Davis isn't a world champion at 35 either, right? Yeah, so I tell you what, we're running out of time. Karray. So let's look at our next topic. I'll give you your choice. One, is anyone going to buy Ruiz versus Arreola on May 1st? Or we can talk about this. Is the sport of boxing in trouble, or has Jake Paul and Mike Tyson revived the sweet science to the mainstream crowd? Take your pick. Which is the last topic you want to discuss?
Let's go if Jake Paul and Mike Tyson revive the sport.
Very good. We'll do that, brother. I tell you what, Karray, all right, guys. Well, we've seen UFC kick the living snot out of most boxing pay-per-view cards on a regular basis, averaging anywhere between 500,000 and 1 million purchases per event. Like the most recent UFC card did 800,000, right? That was the one last month, right? But Mike Tyson versus Roy Jones Jr. did 1.6 million purchases on Triller. And this past weekend, we saw Jake Paul and Ben Askren put up and what looks like it's going to be 2 million purchases from this pay-per-view. Now, I know this isn't the best fighting the best in boxing, right? But it is boxing. Is the sport of boxing in trouble, or do you think Jake Paul and Mike Tyson, do you think they're reviving the sweet science to a brand new audience? Your thoughts on that?
Oh, it's definitely in trouble, and it's been in trouble for a long damn time. See, we could talk about Jake Paul and Mike Tyson. Really? The same Mike Tyson who allegedly turned down $25 million to fight Holyfield?
No, dude, that's just all talk, though, Karray. Now, honestly, dude, unless you actually hear it from an executive's mouth or from the fighter's mouth, yeah, that's just rubbish, dude. It's all smoke, man.
But even with the rubbish, though, it was out there, and people wanted to see him in Holyfield, but we got him and Kevin McBride, and my point is, them are old guys. Like Tyson is an old guy. He may still be an attraction, but how many times do we think we're gonna have Mike Tyson out here putting on shows, or we seeing him in fights? Jake Paul, really? Him? I mean, shout out to Jake Paul. Salute to him. Because he got a lot of fighters now who's swinging from his nuts, just hoping and wishing and hoping that they can fight on his undercard now. But how many times do we expect Jake Paul, Joseph, to put on matchups? 3 times a year, 2 times a year?
Well, so far as his history has shown that he fights 3 times a year.
Yeah,
3 times a year.
What is that doing for the sport? Like, I know, but people are focused in on Jake Paul. We ain't focused in on Regis program, even though it's a great look for a guy like Regis, and good for him.
And this is nothing new to the sport. Let me ask you something. Could you tell me? Do you remember who was on the undercard of Oscar De La Hoya versus Floyd Mayweather Jr.? Could you tell me any of those undercard matchups that were on that?
Yeah, I can remember, because that's the best.
Okay, well, shoot.
That was one of the best. Well, I know Danny Garcia versus Lucas Matisse was
No.
on that undercard.
No, you're thinking of Mayweather versus Canelo. I'm talking about De La Hoya.
Oh, no. I don't remember that. No, I don't remember that.
Of course you don't, because it doesn't matter. Of course you don't, because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Traditionally, people buy pay-per-views for the headliner. This is why promoters stop spending money on undercards, because it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. But just for shits and giggles, I'll tell you who's on the undercard. Okay, Rocky Juarez versus Jose Hernandez. Ray Bautista versus Sergio Medina. Billy Dibb versus Jose Gonzalez. Do you remember that? No, and no one cares. It's of no consequence. But guess what? At that time, that was the greatest selling pay-per-view of all time. Before Manny Pacquiao versus Floyd Mayweather, it was the biggest selling pay-per-view in the history of the platform, right? That's all anyone cares about.
Yep.
No one cares about anything else. But I'll say this, right?
But
I'm sorry, go ahead, sir.
But then was actual real deal fighters. Like, we got to depend on Jake Paul.
It doesn't matter.
Like,
it doesn't matter. This whole, it doesn't matter. This whole argument that, oh, the best need to fight the best. And let me ask you something. Was Mike Tyson versus Roy Jones exhibition, was that the best fighting the best? Was Jake Paul versus Ben Askren, was that the best fighting the dude? It has nothing to do with that. It's all about who's the recognizable name. That's it. Because even if Conor McGregor competes in the UFC, is he the best fighting the best? No, he's the most recognizable name. In fact, over the last 3 years since the Mayweather fight, he's lost more than he's won. It's the recognizable name. That's what mainstream audiences go for.
He's a real fighter. A real fighter.
That's debatable. He's a real UFC fighter, sure.
His class.
You sure about that?
Well, what's debatable?
Yeah, because that he's the best currently? Dude, that's debatable because he loses almost every single time now against top opposition. See, that's what I'm saying. Let me ask you something, Karray. And be honest, right? Be honest, because I just let Chris Mannix have it on Twitter because he wrote this terribly shallow article about boxing. Oh, the best need to fight the best. Really? Well, let me ask you something, Chris. What would happen if instead of Liam Williams fighting Demetrius Andrade this past Saturday, what if it were Jermall Charlo in a unification bout? What would have been the outcome? What would have been the response? Would it have even moved the needle on the mainstream audience level? Who would have cared about that fight outside of boxing diehard fandom? How many pay-per-view units would it have sold if it were on Fox pay-per-view or Showtime pay-per-view? How many would the two guys who are two of the best fighters in boxing but couldn't sell out my living room on a Saturday night? How many units would that have pushed? How many purchases? Would that have made any difference for the health of the sport?
You know what? I don't think so. And you know what's crazy, Joe? I
know what. Go ahead.
I think Liam Smith versus
Liam Williams,
Demetrius Andrade. Yeah, I mean Liam Williams versus Demetrius.
Hold on. Save your thought. Save your thought right there, because I'm going to correct you real quick. Now it's funny. When I first met Demetrius and his father, almost 10 years ago, right? I said Andrade because, I only knew Librado Andrade at the time. And I called him Demetrius Andrade, and guess what? He goes, no. Brother, if you're gonna say my name in an interview, and this was on video, right? He goes, if you're gonna say my name on an interview, you better say it right. It's Andrade. So I'm sorry, as you were, brother.
Okay. Yeah, Demetrius Andrade. I think him and Liam Williams viewership, because Liam Williams is from across the pond, he's a real popular fighter over there. I think the viewership would have still been higher than a Jermall Charlo versus a Demetrius Andrade.
Well, and here's why. And here's the real problem with boxing. It's not the best fighting the best, guys. It's the fact that no boxing diehard fans any longer purchase any of these events. They're streaming everything illegally. Let me tell you something, brother. DAZN, how much is DAZN? $10 a month? $20 if you don't want to pay for it annually?
Yeah.
No. It's only $10 if you want to pay for it annually. It's $100 a year. Or, it's like 8 something. It comes out to almost less than $9 a month.
But that's the boxer's fault, though, Joseph. Of why?
Here, listen to what I'm saying, though. Listen to what I'm saying. Listen to what I'm saying right here. Do you know their subscriber base worldwide is over 8 million subscribers now? Do you know how many their subscribers are in America? Only 10% of that number. You can't tell me that there are only 800,000 avid boxing fans who want to see those prize fights. You can't tell me that only 800,000 subscribers tune in America to see Canelo fight. That means that boxing diehards are no longer purchasing these events and illegally stream them. So best fight the best, guess what? Boxing diehards will still rationalize why they'll justify why they're going to illegally stream it rather than pay for it. And do you know why? Do you know why they choose to illegally stream this? Because for decades, they've been expected to purchase pay-per-views for every major event. Now, think about if this were any other sport, right?
Yep.
Think about what would happen to the NFL if they made you pay to see every single playoff game, including the Super Bowl. What would happen to that sport?
It'll die.
Yep. That's what's happened. So do you think it's helping the sport paying these prima donna overpaid sissies, these bitches, paying them millions of dollars for matchups that we didn't ask for, like Gervonta Davis versus Mario Barrios, and putting it on pay-per-view? Is that helping the sport at all?
Not one bit.
That's the real problem with boxing. Now, May 1st, we've got another one. Andy Ruiz Jr. We're going to shift gears here. That's the real problem, brother, because there's nothing wrong with the allure of boxing, right? People still love boxing. Look how popular the Creed movies have been. Look how popular the Rocky movies are. Look how many movies are written about the sport of boxing. People want to love boxing. Obviously, look at the popularity of this Jake Paul event. It wasn't an MMA event. It was boxing. People want to love boxing. But unfortunately, when you stick these matchups and ask the fans to foot the bill, they're going to justify saying, you know what? For decades, you've been sodomizing us with these costs. So guess what? Now that we have the ability to watch these events without costing us a dime, we're going to do it. So it's basically the fans, the diehard fans of boxing, giving the powers that be, every single promoter and fighter, the big F you and the one gun salute saying, F you, I'm not going to pay another dime to see my favorite sports entertainment. Deal with it. That's the real problem with boxing. It has nothing to do with the best fighting the best.
Hey, Joseph, but what do you think about the pundits who try to justify this card and say, oh, it's just $50 and you got these matchups on here? What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on them?
Let me ask you something, Karray. What's your favorite burger, brother? What's your favorite steak?
Ribeye.
A ribeye. At what place?
At I just went there.
Well, let's just say Ruth's Chris, right?
Mesquite Rodeo, something like that.
Okay, very good. Would it make you feel better if you went to that place and they said, hey, you know what? We've got this deal right now where we're going to charge you only 50% for a day-old steak. Would you feel better about paying 50% for a day-old steak?
No. Not at
exactly. So why should any fan feel good about paying for this fight when it's $50? Oh, but it's a cheaper price. So what? It's a cheap fight. There's no
But they say
reason
this,
why this fight should be on pay-per-view.
but this, but Joseph, you have pundits out there. I don't even know who the undercard is. I forgot, but they say it's a great undercard and it's worth $50. And they say Chris Arreola versus Ruiz is going to be an action-packed fight.
You know what? I'm not going to lie. I like every matchup on this card, on the pay-per-view version of this fight card, on the pay-per-view portion. I like every matchup, and they're going to be barn burners. That's going to be lots of action. But there's no reason why this should be on pay-per-view. Once again, they're going to be entertaining fights, but guess what? I can go see a local club card to watch entertaining matchups for the low price of $20, and that's in person. That's ringside. Okay, look.
Right.
We should be seeing the return of Andy Ruiz versus Chris Arreola on regular mainstream Fox, home of the NFL, home of the Simpsons. And I'll tell you the real reason why we're getting this on pay-per-view is because Andy Ruiz is coming off of, now think about how much he made in his last fight. He made $12 million just to show up in the Middle East and lose his titles to Anthony Joshua. How much do you think he expects to get paid now? Even though he doesn't have a world title around his fat waist, how much do you think he expects to get paid now?
At least a couple of million.
I guarantee you he's not making any less than 3 or 4 million. That's the real reason why this is on pay-per-view and not on regular Fox. Because Fox is
but
like...
Joseph, let me ask you this question.
Go ahead, sir.
What you saying that him making 3 to 4 million, do you think the pay-per-view, the amount of people buying the pay-per-view gonna add up to him getting paid 3 or 4 million? Will PBC Fox make money or lose money off this event?
Look, people don't realize that all of this is budgeted by Al Heyman. Fox just gives him $60 million per year and says, go ahead, put on X amount of events on pay-per-view, put on X amount of events on regular Fox, put on X amount of events on FS1. You've got $60 million to work with. Have at it. So Al Heyman, he's got all of these stable of fighters that have grown accustomed since the dawning of PBC, where he was overpaying fighters because of the Waddell and Reed pension fund, right? Investment fund. He was overpaying these guys an absurd amount of money per fight. Now these guys are used to it. What do you think they would say if you asked them to take a massive pay cut? They would say, you're out of your mind, brother. Right? So he's like, well, shit, what do I have to do now? Because I've got all these guys who have grown accustomed to making millions of dollars for soft touches. I've got no choice. I've got no choice now to put this on the pay-per-view platform to try and replenish some of the money that I'm going to be spending, because I only have $60 million per year to try and fund all of these fights. Al Heyman is in a real pickle. That's why you have yet to see a big Fox schedule be announced. That's why you haven't seen Errol Spence Jr.'s fight announced with Ugas. That's why you haven't seen any of his stable. Like, this is why he's in a real pickle with Deontay Wilder as well. Go ahead, sir.
I'm glad you said that about Errol Spence and Ugas, because I know we don't go off speculation. But speculation is, with Errol Spence fighting all his fights, his last couple of fights on pay-per-view, this will be a pay-per-view fight. So are you telling me Fox pay-per-view is finna give us Andy Ruiz versus Chris Arreola, then Errol Spence versus Yorganis Ugas?
Yeah, of course. And look, you can't support it financially just based on the $60 million budget per year. Think about this. This is in comparison, right? This is what Al Heyman has to work with, and this is kind of the corner he's painted himself in. And then once again, this is no one else's fault but his, right? This is a product of overpaying your entire roster for years and years and years, for the past 5-6 years, since PBC was started up, right? So Errol Spence Jr. expects to get paid now anywhere between $3 million and $7 million per fight. It's impossible. Think about how much that cuts into your $60 million allotment from Fox. So he has no choice. He's got to put this on pay-per-view, try to get a big live gate, and try to get as much money as he possibly can on pay-per-view to try and recoup this money. That's the corner he's painted himself into. And so that's why every decent matchup on PBC is going to be on the pay-per-view platform. That's why.
So that mean with Errol Spence, all his fights going to be in Cowboy Stadium?
Well, of course, dude. Look, do you really think PBC is going to be able to sell those kind of tickets without the Dallas Cowboy marketing team and Jerry Jones peddling tickets to his entire mailing list of season ticket holders? Look at the job he just did for Matchroom Sport and Canelo. They're on the verge of selling almost 70,000 tickets. The fight's in 2 weeks. They've already sold like 64, 65,000. Okay, that's what you get when you work with a real mainstream machine, the best marketing platform in the NFL, Jerry Jones and the Dallas Cowboys. Right? How much do you think they'd be able to sell if they put Errol Spence Jr. versus Jordanius Ugas in the American Airlines Center? I don't even know if they'd sell that out, to be honest with you.
I don't know. You think they're going to be able to put Ugas versus Spence in Cowboy Stadium?
Oh, yeah, and they'll easily sell between 35,000 and 40,000 tickets because they're working with the best marketing team in the NFL. Now, going back to my point on how little money Fox is giving PBC, how much is Fox giving the NFL for all the games, plus the playoffs, plus this year's Super Bowl? How much are they giving? How much are they paying for their NFL entertainment? No, it's more than that.
It was like $12 billion.
No, not that much. $2.2 billion. So why are they only paying $60 million for their boxing entertainment? That's the real problem. And you know why? Because these bitches, these boxing diehards who consistently complain, aren't paying for any of these events. They're not tuning in. They're not paying. I mean, they're tuning in, but they're doing it illegally. They're streaming all this stuff. Right? Think about this. And they're doing the same thing to Showtime. They're doing the same thing to DAZN, right? You can't tell me that only 800,000 people watched Canelo versus whomever, Callum Smith last year. You can't tell me that. They got millions of viewers, but guess what? The majority of them were streaming illegally. Just to put things in perspective, do you know how many purchases Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder 2, how many legal purchases they got? Now, keep in mind, this was one of the biggest fights in boxing, the first and second best heavyweight battling. And this was a co-promotion on the two biggest platforms of sports in America, ESPN and Fox, both promoting this event. Do you know how many people purchased it only? It tallied between...
It was like...
750,000, between 750,000 and 800,000. Do you know how many people streamed it illegally worldwide? Over 15 million, brother. Over 15 million people saw it and streamed it illegally. That's the real problem with boxing. Until they figure out how to monetize and account for all of these people streaming it illegally, it's going to continue to be a serious problem for the sport. That's the problem, because all of these boxing diehards, they're not like mainstream fans, right? I'm sorry. Go ahead, sir.
Joseph, can they? I said, can they fix it? Can they fix it? And if they can, what is the solution?
Okay, here's the solution. You've got to look at, because boxing is run almost identically like the music industry. Music industry has already figured out how to monetize, because they said, well, we can't have people just illegally streaming it on Napster. So we're going to offer people, pay a small amount of money, $10 per month, to stream as much music as you want. Or if you don't want to pay that amount, you can still listen to it for free, but we're going to throw in commercials and we're going to get advertisement for it. That's exactly what boxing has to do. Give people the option where they can get better quality, stream it for free. If they don't want to pay for it, boy, they're going to have a ton of commercials in between fights. They have to look at the business model of the music industry. That's the only way they're going to solve that problem.
Right point.
So there it is, brother. Okay, so we're about an hour in. Is there anything else you'd like to address, brother? Okay, let me ask you this. Let me ask you this very quickly. Now, Teofimo Lopez, and we talked about this last month, and I told you that he was making a huge mistake by not agreeing to be the co-main event of the evening for Jake Paul versus Ben Askren. Do you think right now he's kicking himself in the pants because he didn't agree to be the co-main event on that card? Think about how many people would have seen this fight, right? Is there anything else you'd like to talk about? Because to be honest with you, Teofimo Lopez, how many units do you think he sells on the next Triller event on June 5th?
I don't know, 40, 30, between 20 and 60,000 at the most. I'm
guessing more than that.
Between 20 and 60,000.
Depending on the musical guest, and because he's got Holyfield versus McBride in the co-main event, I think he's going to probably do between 250 and 300,000 purchases. But as expensive as that purse was, right, over $6 million just for that fight, it's not going to be good for the sport of boxing. The Triller's going to go, well, we're making a lot more money because Jake Paul, in comparison, only received a guarantee of $680,000 with all of the incentive on the back end. They're going to be like, why on earth are you guys charging so much money when you don't draw nearly as much? It's going to be a big, big problem for boxing.
And the reason why I don't think it's going to...
Go ahead, sir.
But the reason why I don't think it's going to do that much, Joseph, and you may be right, but the reason why I think it may do less is because of T.O.'s attitude, the way he done turned. You know, dude, you just made it on top, and you turn into this monster like this already. This is what you're showing the diehard fan and the casual fans. This is the arrogant guy that we're going to have to deal with, and you just got here. I think that turns a lot of people off, but, hey, we'll see.
Well, they already know he's a pain in the ass to work with. I mean, the entire reason why they purchased that event, that card, or that fight, is to put it as a co-main event on April 17th. But what was his response? No, there's no way I'm going to be co-main event for any Jake Paul fight. And they're like, well, geez, that's the whole reason why we bought this. That's the whole reason why we paid $6.1 million for this matchup. And he's like, no, I want a headline. That's it. So they already know he's a pain in the ass. Unless he produces good numbers, it's going to be one and done for Teofimo Lopez on Triller. So for the good of the sport, I'm praying that it does comparable numbers. It does at least 1 million. I'm praying that's the case. I'm praying that Triller loads up this card with similar caliber musical events, right? Musical acts, rather. Because if it doesn't, yeah, it's in serious trouble. I don't think it's going to produce a fraction of the. I mean, it's going to produce a fraction of the numbers that both Mike Tyson and Jake Paul just produced. And that's a real problem for the sport of boxing. Honestly, Triller could be the saving grace of the sport because it's bringing a lot of attention to the sport of boxing, some much needed attention. But if anyone thinks the best fighting the best is the solution, they don't understand the real problem that boxing faces. Go ahead.
If they're gonna be the saving grace, they should not make this mistake with these fighters no more, like Teofimo, who think they bigger than what they is, and not fight on a card like a Jake Paul card. They should enforce these fighters. Hey, you want this money? You got to fight on this card. This is on the card.
Well, they need to start making this incentive based on ratings, right? Because these guys demand way too much money. They've grown accustomed to receiving inflated purses that don't reflect their accurate market value. Teofimo Lopez, has he proven? I mean, he's never even been an A-side headliner before. He's never proven. I mean, he's never shown that he can sell out an arena. He's never shown that being the strong A-side, he can put up good ratings on ESPN. Keep in mind, the last fight, he was the B-side to Vasily Lomachenko. That did an amazing number of viewers, almost 3 million. But can he do that fighting George Kambosos? No one knows. So once again, you have this guy.
What type of shot you give Kambosos in this fight?
Okay, well, this is another thing. Look, because of Kambosos' mentality, he's a very physically and mentally durable fighter. But when you look at the physical gifts and the confidence level of Teofimo Lopez, geez, I'll give him maybe 7-8 rounds at the most, because George Kambosos is a tough guy. And if he's he's depending on what Teofimo Lopez is prepared to see. This could prove to be a very troublesome style matchup because George Kambosos understands, because Teofimo Lopez, because of his physical advantages, his advantages in speed, reflexes, power, he knows his only chance to win is to cut off that reaction time, close the distance, cut off the ring, fight him in a phone booth like Ricky Hatton did Kostya Tszyu. If he fights him like that, he's got a chance. But in my opinion, he doesn't have the physical tools to do that all night. He may start out doing that. His best chance to win is to make it an ugly, grueling fight, just like Ricky Hatton did against Kostya Tszyu. That's his only chance to win. Can he do it? Maybe. I really like his mental toughness. I really like his confidence. And he truly believes that he can't lose in this fight. But he's never been in the ring with anyone who has the physical gifts of Teofimo Lopez. Teofimo Lopez is a physical specimen. He's a phenom. There aren't very many fighters who can do what he can do in the ring. Speed, reflexes, power, agility, everything. Think about what he does after his fights. He does a backflip in the center of the ring. This guy is a phenom. So I'll say this. If Teofimo blows through this guy like he says within 3 rounds, I'm saying this right now, with his charisma, with his mindset, with his physical gifts, he stands to be, if he just listens to Top Rank, he stands to be the next Floyd Mayweather Jr. of boxing.
Ooh, I mean, I agree with you. And I don't want to. I'm gonna leave it at that. But I just look forward. What's making me sad about this sport, and I know we want to get off here. We have an excellent, undisputed matchup coming up at the end of May. with Josh Taylor versus Jose Ramirez, and
Uh-huh.
this get no publicity at all. Like, no one's talking about this fight, Joseph. No one.
Yeah,
And I look
well,
forward to talking and breaking down this within the next couple of days.
well, don't worry, okay? The guys at Top Rank and ESPN, they know what they're doing. Watch, as soon as Canelo is finished with his fight, right, on May 8th, that's all you're going to see and that's all you're going to hear is Josh Taylor.
You know why I say what makes me sad about it? Because when I look at this fight stylistically, I look at this as the best matchup that could be made in boxing. If we look at
it's got Fight of the Year written all over it. Two undefeated.
This is the best fight.
Two undefeated unified champions at 140 pounds, and they're going to fight. This is unheard of. This is a mythical type matchup, man. This is what boxing needs. And best of all, it's not on pay-per-view. Best of all, it's not on pay-per-view. So trust me when I tell you, after Canelo's finished with his campaign on May 8th, this is all you're going to hear about and all you're going to see, right? Everyone said Mayweather versus Cotto was going to be a bust because you really hadn't heard any kind of promotion. And I know because I covered this fight. But for some reason, the week of the fight, it blew up and became a huge success on pay-per-view, as well as the live gate. And that's what you're going to see here. Top Rank knows what they're doing, guys.
And Joseph, I'm glad that you said Top Rank. I'm glad that you definitely mentioned this to our audience here on War Week Radio about how this fight, this undisputed matchup, is on free TV on ESPN. Don't nobody do it like Top Rank. I'm sorry.
Well, yeah. You know what?
But
absolutely,
like Top Rank.
Absolutely. And look, Aram understands that boxing right now is trying to rebuild their relationship with a more mainstream and casual audience. And they understand that obscuring the best matchups on the pay-per-view platform isn't going to do it. So Bob Arum, Todd DeBuff, Bruce Trampler, Brad Goodman, Carl Moretti, all those guys, their MO is to put the best matchups on free TV and to try and keep the best matchups, if they can afford it, off the pay-per-view revenue stream. That's the best thing that any promoter or network can do for the sport of boxing. So with that said, brother, we're gonna have to take off. But do you have any parting shots for our listening audience today?
Hey, man, I just want everybody to make sure y'all subscribe to War Week Radio. Don't nobody do it like this on YouTube. Y'all make sure y'all go to FightSaga.com and y'all subscribe to that page. They put out the best articles out there. Shout out to Lee. Shout out to Joseph. You know, shout out to everybody who rock with me on R2BA Boxing Talk. Y'all make sure y'all go to my Facebook group and y'all go subscribe to that.
Thank you, Karray, for all your time, brother. And I tell you what, we're going to have to vote just one show where we just let you rant and just argue, man, with all of your diehard followers and fans. So I miss hearing it, brother, but thank you for listening to me rant today, man. And
oh, love it. Hey, Joe, I'm telling you, when I say, like, people gonna get to see over the time coming why you, like, I really feel like you is definitely one of the best when it come to breaking down the sport, because, like, when they come to talking boxing, and if you smart, if you don't got no ego, when you talk to somebody who know boxing, you could tell when they got it covered from the north to the south to the east to the west. Joseph got that, and you know you got to pay attention and listen to guys like that who done, especially guys whose resumes and who done been around.
Well, God bless you, Karray. I appreciate you saying that, man. And I've the utmost respect for your brand and everything you're doing. And thanks for all of your hard work for Fight Saga. And we look forward to seeing all of your coverage in 2 weeks for Canelo versus Saunders. That's going to be a tremendous event at the AT&T Stadium. So we look forward to seeing all that. But guys, until next time, signing off on behalf of Mr. Karray Bradshaw, I'm Joseph Herron. Thanks for tuning in to War Week Radio. Have a great afternoon, everybody.